So yes, maybe he's a plant, maybe he's an innocent pawn, a puppet, maybe he's simply a guy trying to do the right thing who's in the wrong place at the wrong time and has simply been set up. But it doesn't really matter at the moment. What matters is what this case is really about. And what it's about is curtailing freedom of speech, removing government accountability, and also very likely an attempt to keep some very important information concerning the banks out of the public domain. You see, as with all of these cases, folks, it's very important that you look at things holistically. Nothing is ever the way it seems. Nothing is ever the way the media tells you. And certainly nothing is ever the way the government tells you. As I've often said, all the government does is lie. And so it's important that you don't just believe what you hear. It's important that you research these things for yourself. Hell, don't even believe me. Go and have a look at it for yourself. But when you look at it, step back and look at the whole thing holistically. Because very often there's something there in the background that is usually hidden at first glance. And folks, if it's a major problem, if it's a major scandal, and there's a lot of noise being made about it, then it's a pretty sure thing to bet on the fact that it's got something to do with the banks. The banks control it all. The banks control all of these organisations anyway. The banks control the governments. The banks control organisations such as the FDA. And speaking of which, it would appear that Bill S510 simply doesn't want to go away. We had a bit of a reprieve last week when the bill got sent back to the Senate, but now it appears that it may be getting through anyway. So I'm not quite sure, but it would seem, from some reports I'm hearing, that the bill has actually been changed and passed. And if this is true, then this is extremely dangerous, folks, because anyone caught not obeying the food guidelines outlined in the Food Safety Bill basically gets dragged off to a court that's run by the FDA, and you don't get any chance to have any legal representation or anything. It's basically a star chamber. You get dragged into a star chamber, and agents of the FDA decide your future. That's basically what happens if you get caught under the food bill. You can't even demand your rights under the Constitution. All rights are revoked. And you've got to understand, this is being run by the FDA, folks. And the FDA are already responsible for the death of millions simply by their promotion of cancer, through their pushing of GM foods and fungicides and things on the people. The FDA is a disgusting organisation. It has nothing to do with food safety. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What the FDA actually does is ensure that the food is unsafe and that the human race follows the path of genetic manipulation that it's being led down. Now, as I said last week, folks, there was going to be a couple of people, at least one senator, that had said that he would not be voting the bill, and so that it would not get through the Senate if they tried to get it through again. And we kind of got a little bit confident about that, and we thought, well, okay, this guy's not going to let it through. It's not going to get through. So they're going to have to wait till next year. But it would appear that what they've actually done in order to hurry it along, the House has attached Bill S510 to another bill, a bill called HR 3082, the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Appropriations Act. And it would appear that the bill hasn't changed very much at all from what they tried to get through a week or two ago. But they will probably get it through by tacking it onto this Veteran Affairs Bill. How they've managed to do this, I really have no idea, but this would appear to be what has happened. It would appear that the House actually took the Senate bill and rewrote some portions of it so that the provisions to raise revenue came from them. Then they sent it back to the Senate, and the Senate then attached it to HR 3082. So they're trying very hard to get this through, folks, and this is the Nazification of food. You've got to remember, like I said, if you break these laws outlined by this bill, you don't get to go to court. You get to go to a star chamber run by the FDA where they decide your fate. This is basically food Gestapo. This is exactly what the Gestapo used to do in Germany. They'd come along and say that you'd done something under their rules, and then they'd bring you before a Gestapo tribunal to decide your fate. These are called star chambers. Star chambers were outlawed by habeas corpus when that was brought in back in the 1600s or 1700s. And any judge that attempts to erect a star chamber could be sentenced to 25 years in jail. So they're not doing it with judges, they're doing it with private committees made up of FDA officials. This is the food Gestapo. There's nothing else that you could call this. See, America is putting in place these systems that are very much like the Gestapo that we saw in Germany, only they're smaller Gestapo divisions. We've got like the food Gestapo here with the FDA. We've got the transport Gestapo with the TSA. And then we've got the main Gestapo in the form of the Homeland Security Department, which acts like an umbrella Gestapo for all the smaller Gestapo organizations within it. So you can see how America is being set up to be even more efficient than Nazi Germany was. The Nazi German counterpart of modern America's Department of Homeland Security, of course, took the form of Adolf Hitler's Department of Fatherland Security, which was the umbrella corporation for such organizations as the Gestapo in Germany during World War II. But what we are seeing with things such as the Food Safety Modernisation Act, if it has been implemented, and even the fact that they are attempting to implement such a bill, what we are seeing is very, very much the fall of America. America is becoming a fascist state, and they are putting all the systems in place now. And at the rate they are going, I would expect the entire country to be completely locked down into a high-tech version of Nazi Germany within the next 12 months. I mean, just looking at things, folks, there can be no denying that this is exactly what is happening to America. I mean, if they start getting too much backlash from the people, they might stretch it out over a couple of years or even 5 years, but they have the systems in place now that gives them the potential to completely lock down America within the next 12 months if they should wish to do so. As I said, there is certainly no denying that this is exactly what's happening. And of course, you can take it further. You can bring the FEMA camps into it. There's so many signs to indicate exactly what's happening, and it's becoming painfully obvious what the truth is. And all of this loss of freedoms is, as I've often said, being presented to the people under the guise of protecting their freedoms. It's the most incredible reversal of logic that I've ever seen. And from an international perspective, it is incredibly apparent what we are seeing happen with America. And it's also a very sad thing to see. Sad and also very frustrating. Frustrating because there's nothing anybody in the world can do for the people of America. Because the only people who can truly save America at this stage are the people themselves. And the world stands on a knife edge at the moment because America is the most powerful military nation on earth. And should America fall to fascism, which is what we are seeing right now, then this puts the entire world in danger. If you've got a bunch of paranoid fascists running the most powerful military machine in history, then after they've locked down America, of course, their next move is going to be to lock down the rest of the world. And that is unfortunately what we're facing. And the reality is that the only people who can avert this fate before it manifests are the citizens of the United States. And they don't need violence to do it. They can do it peacefully. All they have to do is realize what's happening and stand up and protect their constitution. And it doesn't even take the whole country to do it. After all, the War of Independence was won by around about 3% of the overall population. Well, I think it's getting close to break time here, folks, so I'll leave it there for now, and we'll go and have a break. I'll try to come back on a little bit more of a brighter note, and we'll talk about a few other things for the second half of the show. Thank you very much for spending this time with me today, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, folks. Now, with all of the things that I was talking about in the first half of the show, all of the problems that we are seeing manifest within America, the slide into fascism that we are seeing in America. Again, there is a silver lining to all of these things because all of them are opportunities for change, opportunities for growth. Because America is not lost yet. It's still salvageable. All the problems can be fixed. They can be fixed peacefully, and they can be fixed very easily. The main problem is that people simply don't know that there's a problem. And when they do find out that there's a problem, it's usually from someone screaming fear at them, and they're never provided with any solution. And I know it probably sounds corny, and I've said it to you a million times before, but the solution is to get to know your neighbours. The solution is to build community. The solution is to realise that there is no difference between people. There's no difference between you and your neighbours. All the division is illusionary, and because our societies have been constructed in such a way that most people within them believe this division exists, then society is therefore unable to stand up against the government and what the government's doing. Divide and conquer. When you see someone being harassed by police, if you, for example, see someone being arrested or confronted by the FDA in regards to Bill S510, it's up to you, the community, to stand up in the defence of that person, to understand that the rules that the FDA are attempting to enforce upon this person are fictional. They're just little lines on pieces of paper. They don't bear any relation to reality. They're not even laws, folks. They're statutes. Statutes aren't laws. Laws are laws. You don't kill, you don't hurt, you don't steal, you don't damage. This is natural law. But all these other things, these are just statutes. And a statute is a piece of legislation that is given the power of law through consent of the governed. And the only way that they are really able to enforce these rules upon people is because people simply don't stick together. People don't stand up for their neighbours. People don't realise that when they see their neighbour being abused or arrested, they are allowing for that to be done to themselves. Because if that person's rights can be taken away, then your rights can be taken away. Injustice towards one is injustice towards all. And it's up to people to realise this. It doesn't take much to work it out. And once people have realised this, then they can simply unify and stand up peacefully in non-compliance to this system. It really is that simple, folks. You've got the strength of numbers. You don't need any guns or wars. You need to evolve the human way of thinking into a way that can accept freedom. Because that's the problem with most people, is that they find it very, very difficult to be free. They need someone to depend on. They need something to depend on. They need a system to depend on. Most human beings are terrified of self-responsibility. They need government. They need this father figure. Well, that's okay. If you need government, fine. Have government. I don't particularly think we need it, but if you want to do that, fine, have government. But you sure as hell better make sure that you do not have a bunch of criminals running that government that are seeking to take your rights away, because that's what you have in America at the moment. You have an incredibly powerful military machine that is basically run out of Europe by a European banking cartel. You have a whole puppet government in place, and the sole function of this governing body is to create conflicts overseas and to remove the rights of the people domestically. Folks, America is very much being turned into a high-tech version of Nazi Germany, and we're going to see exactly the same actions as those that we saw from Nazi Germany. All the FEMA camps are in place, all these things are in place. But this will only happen if the people allow it to happen. You can see it happening, you can be aware that this is what is happening, but it all comes down to choice. It all comes down to whether the people choose to remain in fear, or whether they choose to change their energetic state to one of love and unify with the people around them, because that is what's going to fix the problem. And that's the only thing that's going to fix the problem. It's really important that people stop seeing their neighbours as a threat. It's really important that people start helping each other and supporting each other, and that the community starts standing up for each other. It's really important that human beings start establishing a currency of friendship with each other. Friendship is the greatest currency, folks.